Recording in.
Okay, I'm Kendall Kaut. I write for a site called Sikkim 365. Also wrote a book called How They Drew It Up after Baylor won the 2021 championship season. Still get that on Amazon, Target Online, tryonbooks.com. So if you like this video and you want to buy a book or you want to subscribe to Sikkim 365, what a great moment for America. There'll be some lights in the background. Sorry if you got epilepsy or whatever else bothers you. Today we're focused on Keyonte George and his performance in the final few minutes against Virginia. Baylor went to Keyonte George down the stretch. He's likely to be a top 14 pick at the very worst right now in the NBA draft. Sam Vecenie of the Athletics, most recent mock draft, has George at number 7 overall. And we look at the offensive numbers when we turn to Ken Palm's box score after the game. Baylor put up a very respectable 1.18 points per possession. The Bears currently have the nation's #1 offense. They took over that mark following their victory over UCLA and the Continental Tires Classic out in Vegas. I was out there and covered both of those games. And when you look at the box score, it may not stick out to you that Keyonte George only has an offensive rating of 100. But down the stretch, Baylor went to Keyonte George. So let's go ahead and turn to the video. And before turning to his second half performance, I think it's helpful to look in the first half when Baylor decides to run a middle pick and roll with George. You can see that Virginia often wanted to have their big men come out to hedge against Baylor, make it tougher for the shooters. That's how Virginia's traditionally played, especially since they weren't so effective last season, at times playing a bit more conservative on the coverage front. So Virginia comes out, big man hedges. Flo Thomba's going to get toward the hoop. And you look at George here, and this, I think, kind of shows how he's more of a wily player and has a very high basketball IQ. He's able to pause his dribble, freeze the defender. Flo's got a step. But you look and see Jalen Bridges in the corner over here. Virginia's defender might be able to lunge down or stunt down. Dale Bonner's contested with a good cut here. Adam Flagler's in the corner, so we know Keyonte Clark's not at risk. So it's really, can Keyonte George thread that pass and make sure the trailing defender can't get to Flo, that the defender on Jalen Bridges can't stunt down. And so look at this pass. I mean, we'll run it again in full time in a second here. Because live, I think, really shows how great this pass is. Catches it, Flo dribbles, comes down, the pass hits him in the left hand, gets the score. I mean, if that pass is not right on the money for Flo's left hand, his free hand, it's not a score. Virginia gets a steal, they get a deflection. Only the pass can be there for a score. Excellent play there by Keyonte George. Baylor found itself down by as many as 21 points in the second half. And so with about 8.5 left, they start deciding they're going to run a middle pick and roll as much as possible with Keyonte George. George has great feel for the game. He's an exceptional passer, can fling the ball from one side to the other, and a good bad shot maker, as we'll show in a few seconds. So Keyonte comes up and catches the ball right here, sets middle, and you can see the big man's going to be a little delayed, has to run up, and now Keyonte is just going to reject the screen, drive to his left, which shows how good he is going left, and hit Lohner for the oop. So this play is kind of a reflection of three things. First is that Flo steps up quickly to the screen. Second is Keyonte notices that the big man's going to be coming away from his left hand, so he's going to drive here. And third is that weak side up here where Caleb Lohner is, or the side away from the ball, only has one defender down below because Dale Bonner's up high. Keyonte Clark's going to be very reluctant to help off of LJ Cryer, given how well he shot in the first half and how dominant he was from the field last season, which means if Keyonte can get downhill right here, there's going to be one defender who will have to decide, do I let Keyonte George, a lottery pick, get to the hoop unimpeded, or do I leave Caleb Lohner possibly alone in the corner where he's not an elite three-point shooter? Because of Keyonte's speed, big man's not going to be able to help out. Virginia's defender here can't do much. Keyonte Clark has to make a business decision, abandon LJ Cryer or come up to contest. Virginia's down in the paint now with their low man, going to help out on Keyonte to make sure he can't get a dunk. And Caleb Lohner with the wise cut. And Keyonte with an elite pass for an alley-oop. Really a perfectly drawn-up play for Baylor there. Elite play by Flo Thomba. Dale Bonner staying in a good spot. LJ Cryer shot making, allowing that play to happen. And then it's just Keyonte George, too athletic and too good to be able to stop. So that's why the middle pick and roll is kind of so devastating for Baylor. Even when you maybe think, hey, Caleb Lohner's not a great shooter, we can have a low man down here to help out. Just not going to work out for you if you're Virginia on that set. Later on, once again, Keyonte's going to come up after the screen, use it, and draw the foul. So when we kind of run it back and see, okay, what's successful for Baylor on this play, and that's the oop again. Keyonte runs hard to the ball, good hop into it. And one thing I really like about Keyonte's game is when he puts the ball out on one side, because he's so good at driving both left and right, if you're the defender, you kind of have to respect that. So he's looking to make the screen forced toward the middle. Virginia runs a pack line. They generally want the action forced towards the middle. Keyonte gets a step. If you're late to Keyonte George, don't bother showing up. Foul. Extra points for Keyonte there. So that's just a sign that, okay, you think you forced him toward the middle. If you're a second late, Keyonte's going to score. One of the next sets. Keyonte's got the ball toward the middle. He's going to drive left. Actions there. Freezes him with the dribble hesitation there. Comes back with the crossover. Makes him go to work. And this is when he would just be super frustrated, right? You can, if you're Virginia, you think right here, okay, we forced him into not an opportune shot. The step back, how he can come up the top. Fran mentioned earlier when I watched the game that Keyonte does a great job of just getting the ball up without much of a dip. That means that even with 21 coming up here, thinking he's got a good contest, Keyonte's still got the open range to hit that shot. Now, is that the highest percentage shot Keyonte's going to take this season? Absolutely not. But the ability to make that shot, again, adds to kind of the difficulty of defending Keyonte because you think, all right, I don't want to come out all the way on key. I got to do this. Not a good place to be if you're Virginia, if he's running middle pick and rolls. So action into Caleb Lohner hits him. And so we've got Keyonte farther away from the hoop, which means he's going to have more momentum once he gets a few steps to start his drive, which is going to be tough for Virginia. Caleb Lohner is going to come out and set the pick. A little more devastating than Flo Thamba in one respect. Flo's going to set harder screens than Caleb will. Flo's one of the best screen setters in the country. But Caleb Lohner is going to be more of a devastating force in the short roll because he's more of a play creator, and he has a little bit of three-point range, so Virginia's got to be cognizant of that once Keyonte George gets the ball. And then there's just a split here, and it's like, what can you do? Adam Flagler, one of the best catch-and-shoot three-pointers in the country, hits it. So we come back here. And because Lohner can split this, Virginia comes out. There's a little bit of space here. There's not a whole lot. But this, again, relates back to how good of a creator and ball handler Keyonte George is. Splits through it. And once you've done that, you've got a 4-on-3 opportunity. And so you've got to decide if you're Virginia, okay, you've seen Keyonte George get to the hoop for an alley-oop. You've seen Keyonte George get to the hoop for a foul late when the big man couldn't help out. And so now, if you're Armaan Franklin, you decide that you want to stunt and help off and go full contest on Keyonte. Well, here's the problem. Adam Flagler gets open. He's going to shade toward the hoop. Get an open three. And he's such a good catch and shoot three-point shooter. He hops into his jump shot, and it's money from there. And kind of one funny thing, if you were in the arena or heard the audio, is that you can hear Adam Flagler kind of let out a yelp for the ball. That was an old Davion Mitchell special. I remember asking him about that 2 seasons ago. He wasn't even aware that he would call for the ball like that, but that draws Keyonte George's attention. Open three, speaks to how tough Baylor is to defend. If you got Keyonte George in a 4-on-3 opportunity with a good three-point shooter in the corner, it's either going to be a bucket with Keyonte driving to the hoop like it was earlier, or it's going to be an open three-point shot for one of the best three-point shooters in the country, and Adam Flagler. Either way, you picked your poison. John Jacobs mentioned on a podcast, and he's Baylor's associate head coach. He was with Ashley Hodge, who is one of the site owners for Sikkim 365, where I write, analyze some hoops, that Baylor's offense wanted to get to a place where no matter what decision you would make, it would be the wrong one. So if you're Armaan Franklin there, you either defend Keyonte George like he chose to do, and Adam Flagler's open for three, or you make a different decision and you elect to, stay on Adam Flagler and Keyonte George gets the hoop unimpeded. That's that example that John Jacobs is talking about. There is no good decision for Armaan Franklin there. Whatever decision you make is a bad one, and it's going to lead to a bucket for Baylor. Unfortunately, the Michigan Wolverines missed the kick there as I'm watching Michigan in the background. So again, we've got Keyonte. Here's Caleb Lohner receiving the pass in the middle of the court. He's going to come down. Because of the split last time and because of the ability of Caleb Lohner to split the pick and roll to the hoop pretty effectively, he also does a nice job, if you see Caleb there, kind of hugging the defender to get back. So he gets around. Now he's drawing the attention of 2 men here. And this is just where you're like, what can you even do here? So you see, Virginia feels like, okay, maybe we've slowed him down with the big man on the hedge. Maybe we're kind of vulnerable on the weak side here with Caleb Lohner rolling toward the hoop. Maybe we're going to be vulnerable in the corner if we bring a man down off Adam Flagler. Baylor's going to decide to keep 2 shooters on the strong side of the floor or the ball side here. So Keyhi Clark's going to have to decide whether to help out or not. He stunts, as you can see him providing some resistance here, but he wants to be close enough that he can help back onto LJ Cryer. Low man at least wants to be one lunge back to Dale Bonner, who can be a good corner three-point shooter. But all eyes, if you look on it here, and the resolution's not the best, but you look, every eye for Virginia is on Keyonte George because of what he can draw. And you feel like if you're Virginia, okay, we've stunned it out to Keyonte. We've got a low man ready. Armon Franklin in the corner is ready to zone up, but can at least provide resistance if they can't get something here. And the big man who has just lunged or just hedged is now ready right there. So you feel like if you're Virginia, you really can't play this possession any better than you have. Doesn't matter, right? Keyonte gets up. Great elevation here. Keeps the ball up high and makes a bucket, right? Like, I literally don't think there's much Virginia can do differently if they decide to hedge here. I mean, you've got a defender there. You've got him 12 feet probably from the hoop with when you're looking at what a hypotenuse if we're drawing a triangle here, folks. Just not a lot you can do there. And that speaks to how good Keyonte George is because he's both a good shot maker and he can create good shots for himself. He creates good shots for others. But the ability in high-level basketball is you got to sometimes make bad shots or what we would consider bad shots. And for Keyonte George, that's not a bad shot, right? Because he can get fouled. He can hit the shot there with a floater and he can get to his dominant right hand all within that play. So you feel like it's a bad shot if you're Virginia. You feel like it's the best shot your defense can allow, but ultimately it just doesn't matter, right? Good offense can beat good defense, and that's what happens here, and that's what's so devastating. That's when you relate back to the NBA, a frustrating aspect can be the defense can play it perfectly, and it just doesn't matter. And that's what Virginia had to feel like there. We played it perfectly, 5 eyes on Keyonte, Keyhi Clark lunging out or stunting out as we run it again, right? You see Keyhi Clark providing some resistance, a little bit of a stunt here, but he's still close enough that LJ can't get open. Keyonte keeps the ball high, so whatever resistance Keyhi Clark wants doesn't matter. Comes up, shot, golden. And this is where Baylor will look at towards the end of the games. So the Golden State Warriors are sort of the embodiment of what any team wants to be. For championships, even if you want to discount the Kevin Durant titles because of the riches they had, they still won a lot of titles too with the core they had of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and then Harrison Barnes / Andrew Wiggins and Jordan Poole interchangeably for the 15 title versus the 22 college football, or excuse me, I'm watching college football in my mind, not at ease there, but for the 2022 NBA championship. Don't multitask, kids. So Baylor has kind of that challenge where they need to decide at some point, are they just going to run a million middle pick and rolls? Or are they going to run all this kind of 5-out motion that gets them some of these sets? Are they going to run set plays they've run in the past where they can get a big man open, and whether it's T action or whether they want to run some of their other sets? And so Baylor has a lot of riches, but at some point they'll have to decide, do we just want to run a million middle pick and rolls into the games, kind of like the Warriors had to decide, and why I brought them up? Do they just want to run a million Steph Curry, Kevin Durant pick and rolls? Baylor has time at the end of the season to just go to Keyonte George or Adam Flagler or even LJ Cryer up high because all are so good in the pick and roll and surround whoever is the operator with shooters. But early on in the season, you can develop some of that chemistry between Keyonte George and Flo Thamba that they showed in the first half. You get to run some of those at the end of the game to try and make a comeback like Baylor did against Virginia. And you can always turn to that later on. But I think Baylor wants to make sure they can establish that offense like the Warriors did because, hey, we've got the Kevin Durant, Steph Curry pick and roll ultimately to go to. And if you're Baylor, hey, if the game's close, we can run that Keyonte George middle pick and roll, whether it's Caleb Lohner, whether it's Flo Thamba like it was earlier, or whether it would be Josh O, as they didn't run as much in this game, but they can run later on as Josh O, I think, gets more familiar and more comfortable running some of those sets. And the final thing I wanted to show in this video was after Keyonte George fouls out, you can kind of see that he's very shaken up emotionally. He's kind of spent emotionally. And you see Scott Drew really comforting him in the game. And so I'm at this game. I'm kind of across behind Fran Fraschilla next to Baylor's broadcasting crew of Pat Nunley and David Kay. And that really stuck out to me at the game. And the camera does a nice job for ESPN capturing this. A lot of lottery picks are there to, hang out for a year. I don't, play school, as Cardell Jones would say, since I've got Ohio State in the background for myself right now. But Keyonte George really, really, really cares. And you see how shaken up he is that Baylor has lost this game, that his efforts weren't enough to will Baylor to victory. But how much he cares, I think, is something that the NBA scout should really pay attention to. He is not just at Baylor to hang out, be on a team that'll win a lot of games with him kind of half-souling it so I don't cuss on a YouTube broadcast that's flagged for kids. He is there to win basketball games, to get better, and to help out his teammates. And that emotion that he has on his face, how shaken up he is by a regular season game and a loss in the regular season, I think speaks well to both who he is as a person, how good he's going to be for Baylor, and how dominant he'll be in the NBA for years to come. So that's what we got for right now. I appreciate everybody for watching right now. Good look at the Bears to open up the season. We'll have plenty more of these down the stretch.